In this video, we're going to be going over the top 5 problems on this 3rd generation Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo. Now, there's nothing wrong with this vehicle. There's nothing wrong with buying one or owning one. Every car has their problems. These are just the top 5 that we have found. Number 1, the throttle body. Now, the throttle body is located right here on the top of the engine. Now, what the throttle body actually does is it opens and closes. It's almost like a valve, and there's a flap in there. As it opens, it allows more air to get into the engine. Now, whenever you step on the accelerator pedal, that's when it opens. When you let off, that's when it closes. Some of the symptoms you may find is the vehicle could stall out, or you could have an extremely rough idle. And you can also have a check engine light with a code P0122. Now, if you just have the drivability issues, you potentially could try to clean the throttle body. It may not solve your problem. You might be better off just replacing it. If you have the check engine light with the code, chances are you just need to replace the throttle body assembly and check that connector. If the connector's loose, that could cause the issue also. Number 2, the ignition switch. Now, we all know the functions of the ignition switch. You have accessories, you have on, and it starts your vehicle and keeps your vehicle running. Now, you may notice some of the symptoms when the vehicle is running. A lot of the dash lights are flickering or some other weird electrical problems. And you can also use a higher end scan tool and scan the different modules in the vehicle. And you may find a code C140F in one of the modules, whether it's a BCM, body control module, or a comfort module, or something to that effect. Now, to fix that, you're gonna have to replace the ignition switch. Not the ignition cylinder, but the switch itself. Number 3, the fuel pump. Now, it's located in the fuel tank itself, and it pressurizes the fuel and sends it up the lines, up to the engine. One of the symptoms you may notice is when you go to start the vehicle, it will crank, the engine will be turning over, but it won't start. Now, if you're stuck somewhere, one of the things you might be able to try is have someone crank the engine and take a hammer or a rubber mallet and try to hit on the gas tank. That might loosen up the starter so that you actually get some pressure and the vehicle start. Now, that's only a temporary fix. That's just gonna get you home. It's not gonna fix the problem. You gotta replace the pump. Now, to replace the fuel pump, you are gonna need to support the fuel tank and lower the fuel tank down. It's always a good idea to drain most of the fuel out when you're doing that. Replace the pump on the top of the tank and then reinstall it. In some vehicles, there's actually an access from inside the cab where you can take off a plate and access the fuel pump, but most of the time you just have to drop the tank. Number 4, the starter motor. The starter motor is located right here on the side of the engine, about halfway up the engine on the driver's side. Now, one of the symptoms you're gonna find is the vehicle does not start. Now, opposite of the fuel pump where you had a cranking no start, this is just gonna be a click or nothing at all when you go to turn the key. Now, you always wanna check your battery condition. You always wanna check the cables as well and the connections. But if you're in a jam and you have a small hammer and you can access the motor, what you can do is have someone cranking the engine and give the starter a tap. If it starts right up, you know that's your problem and it'll get you home at least. It's only a temporary fix. To replace it, you are gonna need to take this panel down. Make sure you disconnect the battery. You can disconnect the bolts on the starter, take it out, put the new one in, you should be good to go. Number 5, the thermostat. Now, the thermostat on this engine is located right here. Down below on the passenger side, this is the 3.7 liter engine. If you have a different engine, it may be in a different location. Now, what the thermostat actually does is it's going to control the flow of coolant to the engine. It allows the engine to warm up to operating temperature, and then it opens, allowing more coolant to go through the engine to keep it cool. But if the thermostat is in the stuck open position, too much coolant's going to go through the engine and it's never going to get up to operating temperature. And on the other hand, if the thermostat is closed, then the engine's gonna get too hot and overheat. You might even get a check engine light with a code P2181. The only thing you can do is replace it. There's nothing you can do to fix just the thermostat itself. You can't clean it. So replace the thermostat, and if you have the chance, replace that housing as well. It's a plastic housing. Over time, the plastic's gonna break down and it's gonna leak. How you're going to replace it is you want to drain the coolant. You want to make sure the engine's not hot when you're draining the coolant. And you can take this hose off. There's a hose clamp. And then there's 2 bolts that hold that on. Take that off, clean up the surfaces, put the new one in, put it together, put the coolant in, and you're good to go. So there's the top 5 problems that we have found with this Jeep Cherokee Laredo. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos.